and welcome to another episode of the Unlocking Fitness podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Pitts, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about the little injury hack that can trigger big performance results. And we're going to do things slightly differently today in that we're going to get active, so you can fully immerse yourself in the experience of what we're going to talk about today, and hopefully you will experience something that you haven't before, and it will open up a whole new way of thinking to you. So, without further ado, let's dive in. So I don't know where the saying came from, but small hinges open big doors is a saying I heard a few years ago that's really stuck in my mind ever since. And I guess what it's really trying to say is that it's the little things that make the big things happen. And that's certainly true of injury hacking, especially when it comes to improving performance. So in a nutshell, the idea behind injury hacking is that we find all the ways possible for non-injury specialist coaches to help prevent and build resilience against injury. And one of the best ways for us to do that is to use what I like to call applied variety of movement to maintain a given joint's ability to move freely without restriction or pain in any way it was designed to. And it just so happens that the same things that help to keep injuries at bay are exactly the same things that help to improve performance. So the little injury hack that can trigger big performance results is applied variety of movement. Now I say applied because, well, any fool can vary a movement. That really doesn't take any skill at all. The skill comes in knowing when, why and how to apply a specific variation of movement to the person or people you have in front of you. And when I say variety, I'm not talking about big changes like environment, activity or exercise. I mean the tiny, almost imperceptible changes in a foot or hand position that totally change how the body experiences a movement, how our muscles are used and strengthened, and that are almost always overlooked because they're seen as being technically incorrect. And this is important for us as coaches because there's growing evidence to suggest that an over-reliance on doing the same movements in exactly the same way over and over again is actually causing our minor sporting injury problems. So there's a few studies that have been out recently. WebMD.com said that repetitive motion injuries make up 50% of all athletic-related injuries seen by doctors in the US. And there's been studies published in the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine, amongst others, and cited on Reuters.com, SportsMD.com and ScienceDaily.com from 2018 onwards. And they all cite the repetitive motion that early specialization in sport brings as being a primary reason for the increasing number of muscle tears, sprains and strains amongst youth and adolescents. Now, children's joints are capable of moving in lots of different directions, and because of this, they are resilient against injury. They seem to bounce back quickly from falls, bumps and scrapes, and it's how they master skills quickly. Nature doesn't penalise them for getting it wrong. In fact, it's how they learn. Like, a baby learns to walk by falling down, and each time they fall, they'll fall in a slightly different way, using their joints slightly differently, using their muscles slightly differently, so that their brain can find the most effective, efficient, and successful way to perform the task at hand. I remember in high school back in the mid-90s learning about skill acquisition in my sports studies A-level. We used a book by Bob Sharp called Acquiring Skill in Sport, and I've still got that book actually. And it introduced us to the idea of something called whole part whole learning. And whole part whole meant that we could teach skill acquisition by asking our students to have a go at the action as a whole movement. We demonstrate it as a whole movement and they would copy whether that was a deadlift or a tennis serve, and then break it down into smaller parts for our students to practice before asking them to attempt the whole movement again. So obviously, this has been a really successful method of coaching because it is still widely used today. But it has repetitive motion at its core, and it really begs the question, what impact is that having on our active populations? Now, in his book, The Little Things, Andy Andrews reminds us that it's both the things we do and don't do that determine our success. And we can apply this to every aspect of life, whether it's eating well, staying active, practicing a musical instrument, anything really. But especially variety of joint movement, because it's when we don't move our joints in a huge variety of ways that they stiffen up, which over time leads to an increased risk of injury and developing pain. And as children grow, their bodies develop, it's important to include applied variety of movement to their training so that they can maintain as much of the joint movement they were born with as possible and reduce the risk of developing injury problems. This will not only help develop them physically, but also reduce their risk of developing overuse and repetitive motion injuries as adults. And as adults who've already experienced these kinds of injury problems, it's important to include applied variety of movement into their training as soon as possible, because one of the biggest risk factors for injury is actually a previous injury. So how does variety of movement actually work? Well, the trick here is to remember that small variations are more powerful than big ones, so don't underestimate the power of small. I remember as a kid being told that good things come in small packages, and in this case that's definitely true. So let's use a standard squat as an example, with feet level with each other and about hip distance apart. Now, I don't know what you're doing right now as you're listening to this, but if you have the chance, follow along with this practical demonstration so that you can really experience what it is that I'm talking about and how different your body feels when you do things very slightly differently. If you don't have time to do that right now, if you're not in a position where you can do that right now, you can also grab the link to the 50 Ways to Vary Movement checklist from the show notes and give it a try later if you like. But really, please do join in. So as we go through these variations, only move as far as you feel comfortable, and bear in mind that it might be a good few years since your body has been asked to move like this, so just be kind, okay? This isn't about doing it right, it's about giving your body a new experience. Now, I know that to some people the thought of doing 50 squats is horrendous, but all it takes is a simple bend of the knees and you'll be surprised at how easy it feels compared to doing 50 of exactly the same squats. Okay, are you ready? Let's just start with a couple of normal, exactly what you'd expect squats with your feet parallel and about hip distance apart. So just bend your knees to the point that you feel comfortable. It doesn't have to be a full depth squat or anything like that. We're not looking for technically correct. Okay, so once you've done a few of those, now let's take your feet out to shoulder distance and bend your knees again as far as you feel comfortable. So again, for this exercise, even a small dip as a knee bend is fine. Alright, so that's variation 1 with your feet wide, doing maybe let's say 3 in each position knee bends, okay? So the second variation is narrow, so put your feet as close as you can together. Again, just level with each other and bend your knees a few times. It doesn't really matter, even if it's just once in each direction is fine. Okay, so now let's go back to the normal stance, so with your feet about hip distance apart, and just turn your toes out very slightly. And again, just do 1 or 2 squats in that position, okay? Don't worry about the idea of doing a squat or a regular, normal, technically correct squat. Literally just bend your knees. Okay, this time, again, just take your feet to about shoulder distance, again with your toes turned out, and again, just do 1 knee bend. Then bring your feet so that your heels are close together but your toes are turned out, and again, do another 1. Now let's take your feet back to your normal hip distance apart position, and instead of turning your toes out this time, let's turn them in. Again, 1 knee bend in this position. Then let's go back to having your feet shoulder width apart and turning your toes in, and again do 1 knee bend in this position. And now let's bring your feet close together and turn them in so that your toes are almost touching if you can, or as far as you feel comfortable. And again, just bend your knees as far as you feel comfortable doing that. Okay, so this time take your feet back to your normal position and just put your left foot forward. Slightly forward, doesn't matter how far, just put it forwards and bend your knees. Now, take your left foot, leave it where it is, and just turn your toes out slightly. Again, just bend your knees from here. Now turn your toes in on your left foot instead of out. And again, just bend your knees. This time, let's take that foot slightly forward and make both feet shoulder width apart. Okay, so instead of hips, we're at shoulders. We've got the left foot in front of the other. And again, just bend your knees. And let's go through that toes out, toes in routine again. So do one with your toes out, your left toes out, and then just do one with your left toes in, keeping that left foot forward. Now let's go narrow. So your feet almost together with your left foot slightly in front. Again, just bend your knees. And let's go through that toes out, toes in routine again with your narrow stance with your left foot forward. So one knee bend with your toes out and one knee bend with your toes in. Okay, so let's go back to normal. Hip distance apart, feet parallel. Now move your left foot forward like we did before, but instead of turning your left foot, let's turn your right foot out. So the foot at the back. Now bend your knees. And then turn your right foot in. And again, just bend your knees in that position so your back foot is turned in with the toes. Okay, now we're going to go back to your wide shoulder width stance with that left foot forward and turn your right toes out again. And then turn your right toes in again. Again, just one knee bend in each of these positions. And bring your feet into the narrow position. Let's keep the left foot in front and turn your right toes out again. So again, you've got your back foot turned out. One knee bend here, turn your toes in, another knee bend there. Now this time we're going to go back to your normal hip distance apart foot position with your left foot forward, but instead of having one toe out or toe in, we're going to turn both feet out. Do one knee bend here, and then turn both feet in. Again, keeping that left foot forwards. Now let's take it wide, keeping that left foot forward, shoulder width apart, both toes turned out, knee bend here, both toes turned in, knee bend here. Let's bring it narrow. Feet almost together, left foot in front, turn both toes out. Then turn both toes in. Okay, now let's go back to your normal foot position, hip distance apart, feet parallel, and instead of your left foot being forward, we're going to take your right foot forwards and knee bend here. Then we're going to turn your left toes out, so the back foot, toes are turning out, knee bend here, and turn your left toes in, knee bend there. Okay? So then we're going to go shoulder width apart again with your feet, with your right foot forwards and knee bend here. Then we're going to turn that back foot, toes out, so your left foot toes out, and then toes in and knee bend in both of those places. And then we're going to come narrow with that stance. So we got your right foot forwards, your feet are almost together. We're going to knee bend here. And then again, we're going to do back foot, toes out with a knee bend here. And then back foot, toes in with a knee bend here. Okay, we're already at 38 variations of this exercise, okay? So, let's go back to the normal hip distance apart position. Put your right foot forwards. Turn your right toes out, so your front foot toes out there, and then toes in. A knee bend here. Okay, so this time we're going to go wide with your shoulder width apart with your feet. Your right foot is forward. You're going to turn your right toe out and knee bend there, and then turn them in and knee bend there as well. Then we're going to go back to the narrow stance. So we have your feet almost touching, you've got your right foot forwards, and you're going to turn your right foot toes out and your right foot toes in and knee bend in each of those places. Then we're going to go back to your normal hip distance apart stance with your right foot in front, and we're going to turn both toes out, knee bend here, and then turn them both toes in and knee bend here. Then we're going to go wide. Again, shoulder width apart with that right foot forward. We're going to turn both toes out, knee bend here, and then both toes in, knee bend here as well. Then we're going to finish it off with a narrow stance, so feet almost touching, right foot forward, both toes out, knee bend here, and then both toes in, knee bend here as well. And that's it. That's 50 different variations of squats, and hopefully now you can experience what that feels like to your body. But just to try and consolidate that, okay, now let's try doing some regular feet parallel, hip distance apart squats again, okay, just so you can feel the difference. Can you feel that difference? Now, I've done this over and over again with different groups and always got the same responses. People are surprised that they aren't so tired at even having done 50 squats. Some people have never done 50 squats in their life. They're surprised by how easy the normal squats feel afterwards, and they really enjoy not having to focus on their problems all the time. Now, as coaches, we could simply add these variations to our sessions with no regard for why we're using them or if they're even appropriate for our people, but that's not what injury hacking is all about, and that's why I called it applied variety of movement earlier. Injury hacking is a blend of movement knowledge and your coaching genius. You know your sport or area of fitness. You know the areas of the body that are likely to get stiff because of the repetitive movements, and when you know how to apply it, you'll be able to take the variations of movement that are likely to be the most effective for your people and focus on those to get straight to the heart of their movement problems fast. And of course, you can learn how to develop your warm-up and cool-down routines out of this applied variety of movement too, so you don't have to spend ages on mobility. In fact, I recently wrote a blog post on mobility versus injury hacking, and I'll put the link for that in the show notes. But if you want to find out more about how injury hacking can take your coaching to the next level, you're invited to come and join the injury hacking community over on Facebook at injuryhackers.com. Now, I hope you've enjoyed today's active episode. You're welcome to share your thoughts with us in the Facebook group, and I hope you can see from this small demonstration how injury hacking really is the key to unlocking fitness. Thanks for listening, and I'll look forward to sharing your company again on the next episode. The Unlocking Fitness podcast is a mostmotion original, hosted by me, Sarah Pitts. It's based on the Unlocking Fitness book series, which you can get from unlockingfitness.com. At the time of recording, book 1 in the series is available, with books 2 to 5 in the pipeline. You can find more mostmotion at mostmotion.com and on Facebook at mostmotion.